If you're looking for rock lights, you're probably looking for three things: durability, plug and play installation, and most of all, brightness. Well, today we're going to introduce you to our kit that has all three, designed and engineered right here in the USA. Our rock light systems include everything needed to complete the install. Our rock light kits are designed to be bright, to maximize intensity for well-lit trails and city streets alike. Each puck utilizes 12 1-watt LEDs projecting through high-clarity polycarbonate lenses. While there's nothing wrong with two, one puck will easily illuminate the entire wheel well with nothing but pure white light. We also made the installation super easy with two different mounting options. The shell has integrated mounting points on each side if you have a hard surface to screw into. Each magnet is rated for more than 17 pounds, which is approximately 40 times the weight of each rock light. This kit comes with a complete wiring harness, controlled by an in-cabin push-button switch, or you could wire it up to your upfitter switches. Every kit also includes a set of convenient extension cables to ensure your wiring lengths are just right, regardless of an install on a two-door Jeep or modern HD truck. With over-molded splitters, with fully sealed barrel connectors, from end to end, long-term reliability won't be a concern. And lastly, bash-proof. Backed by a lifetime warranty, the Morimoto rock light system is built to last. The beefy die-cast housings have been powder-coated with the same finish as our Banger off-road LED pods, and the 2mm thick lenses are molded from polycarbonate, known for its strength in tough automotive applications. Now that you know that this rock light kit is the perfect upgrade for your application, we're going to get into the install. For this video, we're going to install the white rock light system. The first step is to pop the hood. Let's get to it. Now real quick, before we jump into this install and start drilling holes and routing wiring, let's talk about what's included in the kit. The first thing we're gonna talk about is our power harness. It's gonna have a button right here, and then it's also gonna have a power, ground, and a barrel connector. So here's the button, here's our ground, here's our barrel connector, and here is our power. And this harness right here is gonna be used whether you're running a white or RGB rock lights. Next up, we have our Upfitter harness. The Upfitter harness is going to be ran if you have Upfitter switches, like this Raptor behind me. On one side, you're going to have a power and a ground, and on the other side, you're going to have a barrel connector. And then that's going to go into our extensions, our splitters, or our RGB controller. Now moving right on, let's talk about the RGB controller. This controller is only going to be used if you're using the RGB functions of the rock lights. We're installing the white kit, so we're not going to have to use this, but it's super simple. You're gonna have a connector on one side that's a single, and it's gonna be routed to either your upfitter switches or your power harness if you're running RGB rock lights. Then with the other connectors, you're gonna run your splitters to the front and your extension to the back. Now you will notice on this RGB controller, we have 4 extra connectors, 2 JST and 2 barrels. You don't need them when installing this rock light kit, they're up to you. If you wanna run extra rock lights or any lights of your choice, you got it. Now let's talk about the splitters and extension harnesses. The splitters are going to be used when routing off the rock lights. So you'll have them, and then your rock lights will come in and they'll connect to your splitters. The extension harnesses are going to be used to run the wiring to the rear of the vehicle. So it's really dependent on your application. If you have a big HD truck, you might need to run 2 extension harnesses. If you're installing them on a smart car, you may just need 1 or none at all. Now, the last piece of wiring that we need to talk about before we hop into the installation, is going to be the fuse taps. We offer a couple different types of fuse taps depending on your vehicle. If you have any questions about what fuse tap you need, head over to our website or reach out to our customer service department. Now that's it. Let's hop into the installation. Step 1, we need power. Like we talked about, we have 2 harnesses. You have one if you don't have upfitter switches, and you have power and ground, and then you have one if you do have upfitter switches. This is a Raptor, so it does. So the Morimoto harness, toss it to the side. Right now, we're gonna find power through one of the upfitter switches and then find a ground to ground it to. Now, since we're doing the upfitter switches, we're gonna find all of them and we're gonna select one, and then we're gonna strip back the wiring. Now with the wire stripped on one of our upfitter switches, we're gonna grab our harness and we're gonna crimp one butt connector on one side, and then we're gonna put it over our upfitter switch and then crimp it down on the other side. Now just crimp it down. Now for this next part, we need to ground out this wire. So you can either ground it to the battery or any ground that you find on the body. This isn't included in the kit, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this wire, go right over the ground wire, crimp it, and then just ground this somewhere on the body. Now, before we get into the actual install of things, I want to show you how to install this kit on a vehicle that does not have Upfitter switches. The first thing you're going to need is a fuse tap. With your fuse tap, you're going to find your accessory fuse box panel. In our case, it's on the very front of the vehicle, and you're going to find an unused slot that has ignition switched power. From there, on that unused slot, you're going to use a test light or a multimeter, make sure it has power, and insert your fuse tap. Now, we're gonna run our other harness that needs to be ran if you don't have auxiliary switches or Upfitter switches. This is gonna create the on-off function to power the rock lights. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna find somewhere inside the cabin, preferably plastic, that's easily accessible. You're gonna pull the trim piece down, make sure there's no wire or anything that you're gonna drill into, and you're gonna drill a 16mm hole. Once you have that drilled, you can install your switch, and then you can plug in the harness and run it towards the engine bay. And then from there, you can plug in your barrel connectors, your negative terminal, and any other connectors that you have. Now we have one last harness to install before we can get into the installation of the actual rock lights. It's gonna be either the Bluetooth controller or just the regular harness. Now, being that we're just running the white rock lights, we're only gonna be running this harness, but I'm gonna show you how to install the Bluetooth controller. So as we talked about earlier, the RGB controller has a bunch of different connections. What you're gonna do, if you're gonna connect it, is you're gonna find where you did your power and ground, and you're gonna take your one single wire and connect it into the barrel nut. Once you have that connected, thread your barrel nut over the connector to make sure it's waterproof. After that, you're gonna find two other barrel connectors on the RGB controller. One is gonna power the rock lights in the front, and one is gonna be routed to an extension harness that's gonna go to the rear of the vehicle and power the rock lights on the back. Now that we talked about running the harness for the RGB controller, we're gonna talk about mounting it. What you're gonna do is you're gonna find the two top screw holes on the RGB controller, and you're gonna get two self-tapping screws. With those, you're gonna mount it somewhere inside the engine bay, away from moving parts or anything hot. Now that we talked about mounting this, we're gonna move on to talking about the splitters so we can get our white rock lights installed. Now that we talked about every single harness, we're gonna get into the actual install, starting with this splitter. Now with our splitter, we're gonna find our single barrel connector and go ahead and install it. Remember to get your barrel nut and tighten it over the top to create the waterproof connection. Now for the other side of the splitter. We're only gonna need two connections, one to power the rock lights in the front and one to run an extension harness to power the rock lights in the back. The other two connectors, you can use the nuts provided in the kit and just cap them off. Now let's talk about assembling the rock lights and mounting them. If you're mounting them to a non-magnetic surface or a fender liner, you'd mount them just like this. You would take the coarse thread screws out of the kit and mount them onto the fender liner. But if you do have a magnetic surface where you want to mount these onto your application, I'm going to show you how to install the magnet. There's a screw right here in the middle, and it's going to be a 3mm Allen. Go ahead and take that out. Once that's out, you're going to find your longer fine thread bolt included in the kit. Once you have that, transfer the washer that was on the smaller bolt onto the longer bolt. Now reinsert the screw back into the puck and only put it in about 3/4 of the way, because we still have to have threads on to install our magnet. So once we have that, you can see the back of the screw protruding out. Grab the magnet and just start to thread it on. Once you have that nice and tight, go ahead and tighten the bolt all the way down. And just like that, the magnet's on and ready to be installed. Now, the next step is to grab the extension harnesses and connect them. Once you have all the extension harnesses connected, you're gonna run them to the splitter, connect it from there, and then run it to the rear of the vehicle. They're super easy to connect. They're just that barrel connector we've been talking about. You're just gonna plug them in and then screw on that barrel nut to make it a watertight connection. With our extension harnesses, locate your first splitter and connect the two. Now with everything connected, we have to figure out how to route our extension harness to the back. What we're gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and drop it down, and we're gonna start routing it on the bottom of the vehicle along the frame rail to the rear. So right here below the Raptor, we noticed that on these frame supports, we can run it above it and all the way back to the back. It's gonna be the best way to do it so we don't have to run any zip ties. So we're gonna start up here at the front and work our way back. As you can see, once you pull the wiring tight, it's nice and tucked up against the body for a clean installation. Now just keep working your way down towards the rear of the vehicle. Now remember that it's your preference on how you want to route the wiring, but we found this is the best way on this application. Now we're just going to run this back one up above the body and the body mount. Now on the bracket right here, run it through the two cutouts and then run it over the frame connector to the spare tire, and that's where you can zip tie it. Right now, we're at the rear of the vehicle, and as you can see, we have the pucks lit up. They look great, but the wiring's still kind of all over the place. That's fine, because the first step back here is to mount the pucks. Because if you try to clean the wiring first, the wiring from the pucks might not reach, and that's the last thing you want when installing this kit. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna mount the pucks and come up with the best placement for them so they illuminate the wheel well as bright as possible. Now make sure you do this and play around with it a little bit so that way you can maximize the brightness inside the wheel well. All right, now it's time to mount the pucks with the magnets. Now remember, as we talked about in the beginning of the video, these magnets are super strong. Now the good thing on this truck, it has this little pinch weld up here. So what I'm thinking is go right behind the pinch weld on each side so that way you can't really see the pucks. So now you can play around with both of them to get a nice even dispersion. And then the wiring, we're just gonna keep it tucked behind this pinch weld and run it down on either side. And now just move on to the other side and do the exact same thing. So as we talked about earlier, this is our extension harness. And as you can see, we're working on a Raptor. The Raptors are wider than any other regular F-150, and other trucks have a wider frame too. Well, in these situations, you're gonna need more extensions to reach the width of the actual truck. If you need help figuring out what extensions you need or how many you need, reach out to our customer service department. Now with the extension harnesses connected, we can go and route them down along the pinch weld to the middle where our splitter is. Now, remember on the other side, we had the pucks powered up to figure out the best area to create the most maximum amount of light. Well, this side we didn't need to power them up, we just mimicked what we did on the other side. Let's get to routing. Next up, route the rest of the wiring to the splitter. Now we have the pucks lit up on both sides. The next step is with the wiring already ran, zip tied up out the way where it can't get snagged and it's just a clean installation. Now that we have this done, we're gonna go ahead and move to the front. Catch all up there. Now we're back at the front of the truck. Remember the first splitter that we wired up to our Upfitter switches? We're back at it. We're gonna use our other splitter and we're gonna connect the two. Once they're connected, we're gonna round it across the front of the grill and over to the wheel weld. That way we'll reach that side, and then we'll also be able to power our rack lights on this side. Let's get to it. Now with both splitters, go and connect the two. So now with the splitter, just lay it across the grill. Don't worry about zip tying anything or trying to clean it up right now. We gotta get everything mounted first. We'll come back through and clean it up. Now the next step is with the pucks on the very front side of the fenders, we gotta get to them. So the headlights, we're gonna take them out on each side. That way once we mount them, we can kind of fish the wiring through and take it where we need to take it. Now to take off the headlights, you're gonna need to remove the 3 10mm bolts. Now the third 10mm bolt is right behind this cover, and it comes off just by removing this one push clip. Now with all 3 bolts removed, go ahead and grab the headlight, pull it out towards you and remove it. And now just disconnect the wiring on the back side. We're at the front passenger side wheel well. We already took the headlight out, so when we start routing the wiring, we'll be able to pull it all the way through and make it look nice. Now, we have them powered up, we just plugged them in and we just ran the wiring up here in the front because we need to make sure they look good. We need to come up with a place to put them. What I did is I grabbed a marker, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take both of them and start messing around with them, figure out what gives me the best shine of light, and then I'm gonna mark it. Once I have it marked, instead of using a drill bit, what I'm gonna use is a razor blade or a knife, and I'm gonna cut an X. That way, once we fish the wiring through, it collapses on itself and it keeps everything tight. So we're gonna walk you through step by step. Let's get into it. Now, with mounting these pucks, the two most important things are to make sure that you have a good dispersion of light, but also that the pucks are not visible from the outside wheel well. I'm gonna pull them down one at a time and grab my marker to make an X where they need to be placed. Now we're gonna start mounting these rock lights one at a time. A pro tip from us is to turn the rock light to where the wiring is facing inside towards the vehicle. That way it's even cleaner. So pull it down, and then you can see I made an X where the puck's gonna go, and I made a small indentation to where I want the wiring to go. Now with our incisions made, we're gonna go ahead and grab the wiring, start pushing it through, and feed it up towards the front of the vehicle. Now it's time to mount the actual puck. The best way to do this is to use your self-tappers and start one on one side and then start the other on the other side. Once you have both of them inserted, go back and hand tighten them. Now this side's mounted, it looks great, and it's a clean installation. We're gonna go ahead and do the other puck on this side. So it's the same thing. We made an X where we wanted our puck to be mounted. We also made an X where we wanted to run the wiring. Remember to run it towards the vehicle for a cleaner installation. Now let's get to cutting the indentation out. Now take your other barrel connector and pass it through. Same thing, just go ahead and feed it up. Mount the puck where you want it to be, and get your self-tapper screws started. And just like that, they're both tight on each side. Now let's get the wiring ran up. All right, now we have 3 out of the 4 sides down. We're almost there. Now before we start on the other side, we're gonna reinstall our headlight and leave the wiring for the pucks kind of loose. That way, when we get all the pucks mounted, we can zip tie everything up nice and tight and make a smooth installation. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall this and we'll get to the other side. Now with the headlight plugged up and sitting back where it's supposed to be, we're gonna reinstall our 3 10mm bolts and our 1 cover. Now we just finished with the passenger side, just do the same thing to the driver's side. Okay, on one side, there's no need to power them up. You just replicate the same thing you did on the other side. So as soon as we have that, we're gonna make our X's, make our cuts, and run the wiring. Okay, now we're almost there. All that we have left to do is just connect stuff. Just twisting on barrel connectors and cleaning up the wiring. Everything's mounted, it looks amazing. So let's go ahead and get this stuff connected and see how they shine. Now, with the splitter that came off of our Upfitter switches, we're gonna wire up 3 things. One's gonna be the extension that we use to run to the back, and then the other 2 are gonna be the 2 pucks that are over here on the passenger side. Now just go ahead and insert them and twist on the waterproof barrel connector. All right, now we move over to the driver's side. With the 2 pucks we mounted in the front, we ran the wiring, and it's right here in my hand. With the splitter, we're just gonna go ahead and connect them. Now, once we have everything connected to the splitter on this side, just walk it on over. Now remember the other splitter? It connected to the Upfitter switches. Now on that Upfitter switches, we had 4 different barrel connectors. 3 of them are used. 1 goes to the extension on the back, and the 2 other ones go on the actual pucks on this side. So the splitter that we ran from the passenger side, we're gonna connect it to the splitter on the driver's side. The kit's now connected and mounted. The last thing we need to do is, with the extra wiring, grab a couple of zip ties and zip tie it up out of the way. Remember, keep it away from anything hot and any moving components. Another thing is, on the extra barrel connectors that we didn't use the extra barrel nuts that are included in the kit and cap them off to avoid any corrosion. All right, the rock lights are now installed on this Raptor. They look good and the installation came out amazing. Now remember, there are a couple different ways you can do this, but we picked one and it worked out best for us. The main thing you have to worry about is tucking the wiring and just taking your time with it. Now, if you want to shop these and something like these sweet XBs, head over to morimotohd.com and we'll see you all in the next video.